The Raiders added a few wrinkles to their offense on Sunday, but the results were the same. They've lost now 6 in a row and are 2-8 on the season. That plus more comes up on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for November 18th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you. If you're checking us out wherever you find your favorite podcast, that's awesome. Thank you so much. We definitely appreciate that. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, that's great as well. The support for the YouTube show has been fantastic. Over 16,000 subscribers, and that's because of you, Raider Nation, and because of the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure we're looking good and we're sounding good on YouTube. We shout him out. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Producers. You can find me on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And of course, you want to chime in on the show, want to be part of the show, whatever your thoughts are, whatever's on your mind, 707-654-4693. As a matter of fact, coming up in segment number 3, we'll close out the show with your calls and texts. And even though the Raiders are 2-8, lost another game on Sunday, trust and believe there's plenty of feedback when it comes to the Raiders. Love Raider Nation's passion for this team, and that's what fuels this show called the Locked On Raiders podcast. So segment number 3, your calls and texts. We definitely appreciate that. That'll close out the show. Segment number 2, we'll talk about my biggest miss when it comes to this team. And what is that? The defense. We'll focus in on that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, just give you the news and notes of the day, and that's really just a recap of the game. The Raiders lose 34-19 on Sunday to the Dolphins, and now are 2-8 on the season. We'll jump right into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. I'll tell you more about them later on in the show, but let's go ahead and jump into the game. Week 11 action. The Raiders lose to the Dolphins in South Beach, 34-19. And I'll say this, I don't think that the game was as lopsided as that score looks or sounds. But at the end, it got a little, away from the Raiders, I should say, with the Dolphins being able to punch in a touchdown and a field goal late in the game. But the Raiders had opportunities. They really did. And it's funny. I say they had opportunities. They didn't have that many cracks at it. You know, as far as drives go and possessions go, I mean, they only had 7 total drives. And the Dolphins did as well, but the Dolphins had a lot more plays that they ran than the Raiders. And in the first half, the Raiders only had the ball for 2 drives. That's it. And the Dolphins had 2 drives, and then they had a couple plays where they got the ball, with like less than 30 seconds left in the first half. So, they were trying to do something. They ended up ultimately running out the clock, but they never punted in the game. Not one time did the Dolphins, I should say, punt in the game. So they had a lot of success, obviously, offensively, that led to their 34-19 victory. But we knew that there was going to be some new twists. We didn't know what they were going to look like. Right, I wanted to see what the wrinkles were going to be in the offense now that Scott Turner is the interim OC and Norv Turner is the senior analyst and Joe Philbin is the interim offensive line coach. I wanted to see what it was going to look like. And I would say this, and Raider Nation, please correct me if I'm wrong, 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. I thought the offensive play calling looked a lot better. I thought it made a lot more sense than what we've seen through the first 10 games of the season for the Raiders under Luke Getsy. So Scott Turner is now the interim OC. I thought that from what he's done before with the Panthers, what he's done before with the Commanders, what he's done before in his coaching career made sense. And obviously with the help of Norv Turner as well, his dad and the senior analyst, I thought that they put some really good things together. Brock Bowers was fantastic. I actually got a pretty good nugget on him a little bit later on in the show. Matter of fact, coming up in just a few minutes from NFL Communications. I mean, the rookie tight end's been phenomenal. He had 13 catches, 126 yards, and a touchdown. He is as advertised. Like, if there's one bright spot from this year when the Raiders are 2-8, it's Brock Bowers. I mean, he's a guy that can be their number 1 target for years to come. He really can be. And now that Big Mike is back, and you know that there's speed there with Trey Tucker. You got DJ Turner. You've got Jacoby Myers. There's some things to like. Obviously, there's a lot of areas that they still need to clean up. But with Brock Bowers there and him being the guy he is, with everyone knowing, everyone in the building knew that he was going to be the number 1 target, and he still caught 13 passes for 126 yards and a touchdown. He is him. He's as advertised. Now, that's the good part of the Raiders offense. The bad part, well, they only ran for 60 yards. And one of those runs was from wide receiver Jacoby Myers for 20 yards. So you take their runs and they had 16 carries for 60 yards, they really only had 15 for 40 yards, right? So that obviously, I mean, they came into the game the 32nd team in the league as far as rushing goes, and they only got worse. They were averaging about 70-something yards a game, and they only got 60 yards in this one. So clearly that was not a good performance. AP told us last week that they weren't going to be able to fix everything in 1 week, and so I get that. The offense did look better, but that rushing attack is just non-existent, and that was part of the identity. That's what the Raiders were supposed to be. That's what we were told, and everything we saw in training camp led up to it. Like, okay, look, they're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be a really strong defense, and their quarterback play is going to have to be complementary and be able to help out and do some of the heavy lifting time to time, and they should win some games. Clearly, that has not happened. So the rushing attack is still not there. When we talk to AP, obviously we'll ask them about that, but that's something that they got to fix. Maybe they'll start to focus in on that coming up this week as they prepare for the Denver Broncos Week 12 action. Gardner Minshew, he threw the ball 43 times. We know that Gardner Minshew shouldn't throw the ball 43 times. 30 for 43, 282 yards, a couple touchdowns, interception. He also took 3 sacks. And the interception came really late in the game. I thought the Raiders were going to get away through a whole game without turning the ball over, and he ultimately did at the end. But it was already, as far as I was concerned, done deal records. I was at the Raiders facility. I did the post-game show with Eddie Pascal, and we were sitting there watching the very end. I was watching at the house, and then I went over to the facility, and at the very end, it was like, oh, there's that interception. Okay. Thought we were going to get away with a whole week going by without the Raiders having a turnover, and ultimately it didn't happen. So just not a good day as far as the rushing attack. Offense looked pretty decent when it comes to the passing attack. The big bugaboo, the defense. The defense could not get off the field. The Dolphins never punted in the game. Again, I'll repeat that. The Dolphins never punted in the game. We'll talk about the Raiders defense coming up in segment number 2, but I did want to get to the Brock Bowers nugget that I got from NFL Communications. Every Sunday night, I get an email from NFL Communications that just highlights certain players and, certain milestones that happen. And they sent this one over, said Raiders rookie tight end Brock Bowers had 13 catches for 126 yards and a touchdown in Week 11. The most receptions by a rookie tight end in a game in NFL history. Yeah, the most receptions by a rookie tight end in a game in NFL history. Bowers has 706 career receiving yards, surpassed Kyle Pitts receiving yards for the most receiving yards ever by a tight end in his first 10 career games. Bowers has 70 career receptions, joined Odell Beckham Jr. as the only players all time with at least 70 catches in their first 10 career games. Also is the third rookie tight end all time with at least 10 catches, 100 receiving yards, and a touchdown in a game, joining Cam Cleveland back in 98, December 27th, and Pete Mitchell in November 19th of 1995. Bowers, who also had 10 receptions in Week 7, joined Jeremy Shockey as the only rookie tight ends all time with multiple games of 10 or more receptions. Bowers is the fourth rookie tight end ever with at least 5 receptions in 8 games, joining Sam Laporta with 10 games in 2023, Dalton Kincaid with 9 in 2023, and Keith Jackson 8 in 1988. So there's that. So obviously that Brock Bowers guy, yeah, he is really, really good. So I wanted to make sure I passed that nugget along as well. And also real quick before we wrap up segment number 1, I wanted to give you the updated draft order through Sunday night through 11 Raider games. The Jaguars have the number 1 overall pick as they're 2-9. Tennessee Titans are 2-8 with the number 2 overall pick. The Browns are 2-8, and the Raiders are there at number 4 with 2-8. Giants round out the top 5 with 2-8 as well. So there's that. And again, just going to go ahead and continue to update you on that because I know a lot of people have interest in where the Raiders are picking. If you want to go ahead and check that out each and every day, you can. Tankathon.com/NFL, and I'll let you know that. Coming up in segment number 2, my big miss when it comes to this year's Raiders team is the defense. What do I mean by that? Well, we'll talk about it in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, including the title sponsor, which is Hillsdale College. And I think we could all agree that time is our most precious commodity. So you shouldn't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Well, our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including, Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and a brand new documentary-style course of Marxism, Socialism, and communism. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Right now, all you need to do is go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost. That's what I love. It's free. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. I also want to tell you about Prize Picks. Been telling you about Prize Picks for a really long time, but if you're new to the show, what is Prize Picks is what you might be asking. It's the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions with a B of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And right now, they've even invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You could double your money even if one of your picks does not hit. They offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your accounts this sports season. Plus, they put their members first at all times. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today. You get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. And that happens, well, you guessed it, each and every Tuesday. So what do you need to do right now? Download the app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, for the folks in the back row, download the app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, Raider Nation, there we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about my biggest miss on this 2024 version of the silver and black of the Raiders, and that is the defense. And I've told a lot of people, like my personal friends, where I'm hanging out, maybe, having dinner with or whatever the case may be, watching the game with, whatever the case may be, that I so regret on missing on the defense. I remember being in Costa Mesa, California. I remember being at training camp and talking about how this defense was going to really carry the load for the team. And, there was a point where I thought the defense was going to be elite, and it just has not been that, right? It hasn't been the defense that I don't think anyone expected. Obviously, those injuries have played a major role. You lose Malcolm Kuntz before the season. You lose Christian Wilkins in season. You lose Marcus Epps in season. You've seen Divine Diablo be out for a little while. Nate Hobbs did not play on Sunday. JB, Jacorian Bennett, he left the game on Sunday. Jack Jones left the game on Sunday. Like, there's a lot of reasons or players I can look at and say, oh, well, these guys are missing. That's why the defense hasn't been where it needs to be. But look, bottom line, it has not been what I thought it was going to be. And on Sunday, it really reared its ugly head. The Dolphins were 8 for 12 on third down, and they were 2 for 2 on fourth down. Again, I'll say it again. 8 for 12 on third down, 2 for 2 on fourth down. They never punted the ball. And the thing about it is, and I went into the game, I talked about it on Friday's show, that the Dolphins were going to try to run the ball. That's how their offense goes, right? That's what makes everything work. They have all the magic tricks. They do all the the motions and everything, and get your eyes looking somewhere else. But it all starts with the run game. So one of my big emphasis was you got to stop the run, or at least slow it down. They weren't able to do that, and the problem is, and what concerns me the most about this situation, there was a lot of changes that the Raiders made with the coaching staff, right? I mean, Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, fired, right? James Craig, the offensive line coach, fired, right? Nora Turner comes in, senior analyst. Scott Turner gets elevated to the offensive coordinator and play caller as the interim. And Joe Philbin, interim offensive line coach. But you know what never changed? Not one time? The defense. The coaching staff on the defense didn't change. Patrick Graham had 2 weeks, to prepare for the Miami Dolphins. And for them never to be able to get off the field. Like, the Raiders were still in the game, late in the game. And it's funny, I was listening to it on my way to the facility to do the post-game show with Eddie Pascal, and I hear Jason Horowitz and Lincoln Kennedy saying, okay, they just scored a touchdown. They're still in the game. But the problem is they've got to do something that they've never done. Even my mom texted me and said, you know what? I had a dream that the Raiders were going to win this game. I think that it's coming to fruition. And I said, yeah, the problem is they have to have something that they haven't had all day long, a stop on defense. And they weren't able to get one. And it just, to me, really blows my mind. And again, you can't lean on injury and say, well, if these guys were healthy, it'd be different. Every team in the league is dealing with injuries, but they find a way to overcome, right? And the Raiders just have not done that. And they have an alpha in Max Crosby, and multiple times throughout the game, Raider Nation. And this is let me go ahead and preface this at first and let you know, at no means am I disrespecting Max Crosby. Am I saying that he's not a good player? He's not elite. I'm not saying any of that. But I'm saying on third down and third and long and third and 8, there was third and 20, and because of a penalty, right? That was they gave that up. They got an automatic first down to the Dolphins. But on certain plays, a guy like Max Crosby or somebody has to step up and seal the deal. All right, it's 3rd and 9. This is Max's play. He's got to step up and make a play. He's got to get a sack. He's got to get a pressure. He's got to get a hurry. He's got to do something to affect and impact the game. And unfortunately for the Raiders, that's not happening. And I go back and it's funny. I was talking about it on Sunday night with some of my buddies. You go back to when Khalil Mack was a Raider, right? He didn't always have every single game was not fantastic, but when the Raiders needed to have a big play, Khalil was able to do it. And so as far as I'm concerned, for Max to take that next step, he's going to have that impactful play when the Raiders need it the most. And unfortunately, with all the injuries that they're dealing with on defense, they're going to need to lean on him more times than not. And again, this is not just a Max thing. This is the Raiders defense. And this is a Patrick Graham thing as well. Like, let's not make no mistake about it. Offense was shaken up, right? There were some coaches that lost their job. And I'm not saying Patrick Graham should lose his job. You know how I am. I never call for anyone's job. But when you have 2 weeks to prepare for this team and you can't get off the field one time on third down, that's a problem, right? You have to find a way to get off the field. When the team needs it the most, someone's got to step up and make a play. Someone's got to have a pass deflection. Someone's got to have a sack. Someone's going to have a hurry. Something has to happen where an impactful play happens and okay, the offense is getting the ball back. And on Sunday, that never, ever happened. So I wonder why. When this is the strength, this is who the Raiders were supposed to be, right? Remember, the identity of this team was supposed to be strong defense, potentially elite. That's what I called them in training camp. You can go back and look at the podcast. I actually had a show where I said Raiders defense has a chance to be elite in 2024. Go back and look. I'm not trying to shy away from it. I'm not trying to act like it didn't happen. I believed that was going to happen. That's my biggest miss. The defense has answered the call at times. They've stepped up at times, but it hasn't been consistent, and that's what this team was supposed to be. Consistently a great defense. And it just hasn't been that. It was supposed to be able to run the rock as well. And then the quarterback play was going to be, it just had to be complimentary. Well, when the defense isn't as good as everyone anticipated, or at least I anticipated, the run game is non-existent. All of a sudden, now the quarterback play has got to be elite. And we all know Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, right? Desmond Ridder, right? None of these guys, Carter Bradley, none of these quarterbacks that the Raiders have are elite. But you have to have elite quarterback play when your other elements, what you thought your identity was going to be, doesn't work. So to me, and I hate that, right? I hate that that's my biggest miss because, again, I saw this defense play so well. Like Ja'Cory Bennett, I'm happy that I was able to identify him in training camp as a guy that was having a great camp. And it's shown in the regular season. He's played really well. It was bad when he left the game early in the game in the first drive for the Dolphins with the shoulder injury. Never returned, right? Nate Hobbs, the guy in the contract year, he didn't even get to play because of an ankle injury, right? Jack Jones actually had a really good game. There's some people that question Jack Jones and how good he really is. Got the pick 6 against the Bengals. He left the game late against the Dolphins with another injury. So it's like the guys that are supposed to step up, Max Crosby, I talked about him early. He missed the game early in the season. So it's unfortunate that if you're going to try to use the defense as your identity, if they're going to be the element of the team that you lean most heavily on, they've got to be able to answer the bell, not some of the time, but all the time, right? They've got to pick up the phone when that call is coming through all the time. And unfortunately for the Raiders, it just hasn't happened. So I don't know. Again, I don't call for people's jobs, right? That's the Raiders and their responsibility, front office and ownership, what they want to do. But, a guy in Patrick Graham where I felt very comfortable with that defensive unit because there was a lot of continuity, a lot of guys coming back, and he's the same defensive coordinator. It just hasn't turned out to be that way. And honestly, if the Raiders can get off the field a couple times on Sunday, they probably win that game, right? Because the offense was decent. Even though they didn't have a run game, the offense was still decent. And so I probably shouldn't say that they probably would win the game, but it would have been very interesting to see how it plays out, right? I mean, again, I think that they had a really good chance. I don't think Gardner Minshew, as much as he takes the blame, I don't think Gardner Minshew was the reason why the Raiders lost. It was clearly that the Raiders defense couldn't get off the field. If you can't get off the field, you're not going to win. And they weren't able to do that. And that's the unfortunate part. That was supposed to be the big time contributor. That was supposed to be the unit that does the heavy lifting. That was how the Raiders were supposed to butter their bread. And unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. And they haven't really done that consistently throughout the course of the season. And that leads to their 2-8 record with the Denver Broncos on their way to town. So that's what I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts are coming up next as we close out the show at 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. That's coming up here on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you about another great sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And I know it's week 11, right? I know that there's still Monday Night Football, and that's it. And then week 11 is going to be a wrap, but it's never too late to get into NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, all new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Go to FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start off with Nathan in the 626. He's calling real quick to talk about a very suspect penalty called on the silver and black. Here he is, Nathan in the 626.
Hey, what's going on? How you doing? Nathan in the 626. Just calling to see what's up. Thank you for everything you do. Now, obviously, I watched the Raiders, and then I also watched the Bills game, and during the Raider game, there was a certain incident where they had a replay and then they threw a late flag after the replay. Obviously, that's ridiculous, but during the Bills-Chiefs game, the same thing happened and they didn't throw a flag. Furthermore, they threw an incomplete pass and then they gave it to him. I don't know, maybe you could shed some insight. I remember back in the day, you shedded some insight on the Raiders and how they had a little bit of a bias against them in regards to penalties. Do you think that's still going on even though they're a bad team? You know, really want to know your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Nate Dogg, thanks for the call, my man. And yeah, man, that was a real suspect call, right? I mean, and look, I don't like to be that guy that comes to the show and is like, oh, well, the officiating is the reason why the Raiders lost again. Like, I'm never going to be that guy. And I'm never going to sit here and say, oh, the officials, they don't like the Raiders and they're against the Raiders. And so they're out for it. Like, I'm not the conspiracy guy. I'm not. And I know there's a lot of folks that are. But that was such a bad, like, just the way that all shook out, I guess, is the way I'm trying to word it, was all bad, right? To have a holding penalty on the Dolphins, to not call the penalty, that was a face mask penalty. It was. There's no doubt about it. Divine Diablo got a penalty but on the face mask, but it was missed. They literally missed it, and then it seemed like they looked back at the Jumbotron, saw that they missed it, and threw the flag. Like, how does that happen? And again, it was a penalty. It wasn't like it was a call that was not there. It was just the timing of it was really suspect. It ended up being offsetting penalties instead of the Dolphins losing 10 yards, and who knows how that shakes out. And, you know, it's like, a lot of people told me, well, at least they got the call right. Yeah, but how many times, especially even this year, has officiating missed the call? Regardless, we've seen it at the end of games when it was as obvious as day, right? The Minnesota Vikings, Sam Darnold, there was a face mask penalty while he was in the end zone, and his whole head got turned around, and there was no call. We've seen it multiple times. So, again, I'm not sitting here wishing that the Raiders didn't get called for a penalty that they clearly committed. It was just the way that it happened wasn't okay with me because, again, you're not allowed to do that. You can't go back and look at the replay and say, oh, we missed that call. Let's throw the flag now. You can't do that. But it seems like that's what they did. Very, very suspect. Nate, thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Al in L.A. Says, Q, what up, my man? Just watching these Chargers, man, it's rough. We still riding with AP over Jim, my guy. Ain't trying to take no victory lap because I wanted to be wrong. But come on, man. This delusion was bad from the start. How can the AP cheerleaders justify this? I don't get it. Harbaugh was absolutely the way to go, and to not interview him was pathetic, in my opinion. Too many emotional people champion for Pierce derailed the season. I think keep up the great work, Q. Just win, baby. That's Al in L.A. And Al, thanks for the text. I appreciate you. And look, one thing I'll say about Jim Harbaugh, and I know that this is going to be easy to go back and forth always. Raiders could have had Jim Harbaugh. They end up with AP. Like I know that that's going to be a conversation all the time, and I don't blame you for the text. I don't think that Jim Harbaugh wanted to coach anyone that wasn't Justin Herbert. Jim Harbaugh, if you go back and look, again, this is not me, Tom. This is not Q, like just trying to come up with some answer. Go back and look. He always talked about Justin Herbert, even when he was at Michigan. How about if you're going to have a quarterback, and he always would identify Justin Herbert as the quarterback that he should have. Again, that's just me from what I know. I was very much in the AP camp. I was the guy that, saw, 2-3 weeks into AP being the interim coach and said he's the right guy. I'm not going to move off of that now. I haven't. Plenty of people called in and took their victory laps, and I'm not saying you, but plenty of people have. I'm not going to change. I think he could be a really good coach. He's just not getting the instant success. He also doesn't have his quarterback. He also doesn't have a lot of his playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, a lot of injuries. And again, I know you can't lean on that because every team's dealing with injuries. There's a lot that AP doesn't have, and he's still learning the job too, right? Like that's probably the most important part. He's still learning how to be a head coach. So no, he's not having the instant success of Jim Harbaugh, but maybe he has the long-term success. So I'm not cheerleading for him. I'm just not going to all of a sudden, 11 weeks into the season say he should be fired. He's the wrong guy for the job. I'm not going to do that. I mean, I gave Josh McDaniels a year and a half, before he got fired. I didn't call for his job. I didn't do any of that. And I wasn't even a big fan of McDaniels getting the job. I was concerned when he got the job, but then, okay, he's the coach. Let's see how it plays out. Didn't work out. So I'm sure not going to bail on AP, through 11 weeks and 10 games. So, again, it's easy to look at what someone else has and say, man, I sure would like to have that. But who knows? How long does Jim Harbaugh in his career normally last when it comes to coaching a team? 2, 3, 4 years? It's about right, about 4 years, right? And then all of a sudden he rubs everyone the wrong way. And hey, I get it. Raider Nation would love to have 4 great years of football since we haven't seen playoffs, right? We've only seen the playoffs twice in 20 plus years. So yeah, 4 years would be great, but maybe in the long term, and we don't know, right? I don't know. You don't know. None of us know. And I could easily be wrong. Right now, I look like I'm wrong, and I'm fine with that as AP is 2-8 and the Raiders are 2-8 overall. But yeah, I mean, he could end up playing out to be a really good coach long term, or he might not be, and he might just be a miss, and the Raiders will have to go back to the drawing board and find another guy. But I totally understand where you're coming from. Thanks so much for the text. I definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a caller from Colorado. I didn't quite understand his name. He's calling to talk about the current draft order and why he doesn't agree with what tankathon.com says. So, he's got his explanation as a mathematician. Here he is. It's a caller from Colorado.
Hey, Q. Long-time listener. This is Tuck Rule Fool from Colorado. Called a couple times. I don't think I've gotten on your show yet. But just another thing, not to harp on it, I said it before. You guys keep quoting Tankathon. They're not right. Okay, they said we pick fourth. We pick second. What am I saying? Why am I nuts? Look, first of all, I got a math degree, a master's in math. So that's my thing. Numbers, crunching. That's what I do. I do this thing called pontificator at the end of the year on some of the boards that look at, hey, all the extravagant ways we can get in. Well, now I'm doing anti-pontificator this way. So Tankathon assumes all 17 games. Dude, we have not played 17 games. So you don't know the records of that. So you got to do the strength schedule, and that's the way the NFL does it, is through the current games, which is week 11, not week 17. So if you actually painfully go through it and look at those top 5 teams, the ones that are 2-8, obviously 2-9, Jags are first, but we're right behind them. We're second. So just FYI, hopefully you can validate this, but I'm telling you it's true. And if you actually do it that way, it is true. All right. Take care. Peace out.
Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you, my man. And look, you can't go any further than the games that are being played, right? You can't look at the whole season and say this is what's going to happen. And that's only if I'm understanding your call correctly. There's only been 11 weeks played, right? And 10 games for the Raiders. So you can only go from where you're at. And right now, the Raiders are fourth in the draft order. They're not second. And the reason why they're fourth is also you have to take into thoughts are strength of schedule. That has to do with it as well. Right now, the Jags, their strength of schedule is 486. The Titans are 508. The Browns are 520, and the Raiders are 525. So that's also something that you got to take into account. So, again, I mean, you could be a mathematician all you want to do. At the end of the day, they've got to play all 17 games before it's all set in stone what the Raiders' order is going to be. And they could end up tying with another team and having them do a coin flip. We've seen that before, right? Remember when the Raiders and the Niners both had the same record and they did a coin flip? I think did Rod Woodson represent for the Raiders? I can't remember if he represented for the Raiders or the Niners. He represented for one of those teams, and I think it was the Raiders he represented for, and he lost. The Raiders lost. Let's put it like that. And the Niners picked before the silver and black. So there's a lot that still goes into it, and there's a lot of football still need to be played. So I update the order just to update it, just so you know, this is where it's at as of right now. But it's not set in stone because they've got plenty more games still left to be played. They've only played 10 games. They still have 7 more on the way, including this upcoming Sunday against the Denver Broncos. But thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, and just got time for a couple more, we got a text from Southern Indiana Raider. It says, hey, Q. Southern Indiana Raider here. Tried my best to watch the game on Sunday. Gardner Minshew needs to be shown the bench. And never another start for this team. Zeus needs to learn how to read blocks and have some patience. He runs into the back of his own guys every time. This defense is a flat-out joke. Max doesn't look good at all, and when I saw Bennett go down, I knew it was a wrap. I'm sick to my stomach watching this debacle week after week. Denver will annihilate this team this week, but there is good news. It'll be in front of a sellout crowd. Good for Markey. This club is comfortable losing, and I'm disgusted. That's Southern Indiana Raider. Thanks for the text, and I can't disagree with a whole lot of that, except for I'll say that Minshew wasn't the reason why the Raiders lost on Sunday. He wasn't the reason. Oh, they couldn't run the ball to save their life. Me and you could have ran for more yards than they did, right? And the defense couldn't get off the field. Those are the two biggest reasons why the Raiders lost on Sunday. I don't think it was a Minshew thing. Did he make a couple bad calls or bad throws? Sure, absolutely. But he wasn't the reason why the Raiders lost. The reason why the Raiders lost is because the defense couldn't get off the field. Max does not look like he's himself right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with him still coming back from that high ankle sprain. We know that that's a big deal, but he also isn't making that big impact play that I talked about in segment number 2. Like, where is that TJ Watt play? Where is that Myles Garrett play? Where is that, defensive player of the year play? Where is that Khalil Mack closing play? Like, those aren't the ones that he's not making. That's his next step in being the player that he wants to be. The Kobe moment, right? The Mamba mentality. That's what he talks about. His favorite player. Where's that Mamba moment? Right, where all of a sudden you need that bucket at the end of the game, and Kobe comes through. When you need that one big stop at the end of the game, Max has got to be able to be that guy to come through with his greatness and the way that he's shown so much praise, and he's talked about as one of the best in the league. Comes a lot of responsibility. So that's what he also needs to take that next step and be able to do. But thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. We'll close out with a call from Vegas. Calling to Vegas. He's calling to talk about the Raiders defense, in particular Patrick Graham, who had 2 weeks to prepare for this game, as I mentioned, in segment number 2. Here he is, calling to Vegas.
Hey, what's up, Q? This is calling to Vegas, man. Another tough loss, man. I want to talk about the offense a little bit, man. It did look a little bit better today. Minshew looked a little bit more comfortable, in my opinion, but at the end of the day, Gardner Minshew is Gardner Minshew. And, with that pass to Mayer, when, if he got, when it was 3rd and goal, I think he would have thrown that ball with zip, man. That would have been a touchdown. So, he is what he is, man, but the play calling was a lot better. The creativity was a lot better. But unfortunately, Minshew is our quarterback. So I think no matter if he's still under center, we're not going to be putting up points or anything like that. But, man, I think it's time to talk about Patrick Graham, man. 2 weeks to prepare for this game. And I know people are going to say the injuries, man. And, yes, I know, but this is the National Football League. Next man up. But the missed assignments, man, on that last touchdown was just embarrassing, man. Giving up 30 points to this team for the first time all season? I mean, dude. It's time to get on this guy. Unfortunately, man, I don't think any of this staff is going to be here next year. But, hey, the silver lining, man, every week when the Raiders lose, we get that tweet from Shador, man. Thank you, God. I don't know why he wants to come here, man, but hey, man, you're going to be welcome with open arms, brother. All right, Q, well, let's just try to finish this season, man. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Colin, thanks for your call. I do appreciate you. And, yeah, your call, I should have played it probably in segment number 2 because I think that you're spot on. And it goes with everything that I was saying, which is, again, my biggest miss this season was the Raiders defense, right? To not be able to get off the field on third down, not one time, right? The Dolphins were 8 for 12 on third down and 2 for 2 on fourth down. Like, that's just not gonna work. You've got to find a way to get off the field, and the Raiders couldn't do it. If they were able to do it once or twice in the game, we might be talking about a different outcome. They've got to find a way to win a game, and they're going to have to play a complementary game where the offense excels, the defense excels, special teams excel. Like, they're going to have a really good game to win one. It's going to be tough against the Denver Broncos coming up this Sunday at Allegiant Stadium because Denver looks really good. Really good. The whooping that they put on the Falcons on Sunday was incredible. So the Raiders got their work cut out for them. I know some people, as I mentioned before, I know that you're rooting for the Raiders to lose every game, and that's fine. Again, I don't care what you root for or how you root, right? You're a Raider fan. You got the right to do what you want to do. I don't root for losses, but I get it, right? And I do think that Shador is going to be the Raiders' next quarterback, and I hope that the Raiders do everything in their power to make that happen. I'm 150%, and that's not even possible, behind Shador Sanders to the Raiders, and I absolutely am. So thanks so much for that call, Colin. I do appreciate you. Speaking of Shador Sanders, have some on him coming up on Tuesday's show. As a matter of fact, heard my guy Mel Kiper Jr. from ESPN. He was part of Freddie and Harry on Friday. This goes all the way back to Friday, but it was some really good stuff on Shador and the Raiders that I want you to hear. So we'll do that coming up on tomorrow's show. We'll also, if AP has anything big and significant to say today as he meets with the media this morning around 11 o'clock, we'll bring that to the show as well. We'll have plenty of conversation, plus your calls and texts as well at 707-654-4693. So until Tuesday, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.